Hello, my name is Amy Williams, and I am the Director of Review and Adoption within the Instructional Materials Division at the Texas Education Agency. My goal for this training is to help publishers participating in the instructional materials quality evaluation understand the state curriculum standards and how to demonstrate alignment to those standards in instructional materials. First, we'll review the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, or TEKS. Then we will review the English Language Proficiency Standards, or ELPS. I will show you how the standards are dissected for the purpose of establishing instructional materials alignment and how you will use that information to prepare your alignment documents. Finally, I'll share some tips and answers to frequently asked questions. Let's begin by talking about the TEKS and ELPS so that you have a better understanding of what they are and how they're organized. The TEKS are the official curriculum standards in the state of Texas. The English TEKS were recently revised and adopted by the State Board of Education. The new English TEKS for elementary and middle school will be implemented in school districts next year, and the high school TEKS will be implemented in the following year. In the high school TEKS, the first section is the general requirements. These identify how many credits a student will receive upon successful completion of the course and outline any prerequisites or enrollment requirements. I've included an example from English 3. You can see in the blue text that students will receive 1 credit after successfully completing the course. Unlike the general requirements, which only appear in high school courses, all of the TEKS include an introduction, which describes the course content and key information. All of the English courses for elementary and middle school and English 1 through 4 in high school have the same introduction. I won't spend time reading the introduction, but I definitely encourage you to do so. Next, you'll find the knowledge and skills statements. These are broad statements of what students must know or be able to do. All of the knowledge and skill statements in the new English TEKS are organized into strands and substrands. There are 7 strands in the new English TEKS: developing and sustaining foundational language skills, comprehension, response, multiple genres, author's purpose and craft, composition, and inquiry and research. The strands include the 4 domains of language, which are listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and also thinking. In this grade 6 example, you'll see the strand in blue text and the substrand in orange text. The knowledge and skill statement in this example does not have a substrand. Now we're getting to the fun part. Student expectations, or SEs, are directly related to knowledge and skill statements. They provide specific information about how students demonstrate their learning, and they always follow the phrase the student is expected to. So you can see how they got the name student expectations. They also always begin with a verb. In this example, you can see where the SE starts in the blue text because it says the student is expected to, followed by the text of the SEs in orange. There are 4 SEs in this example, labeled A through D. Sometimes you'll find that the student expectation has been combined with the knowledge and skills statement, and that is because there's only 1 SE for that knowledge and skills statement. If you look closely though, you'll still find that it follows the same rules. It starts with the student is expected to, which is shown in blue, followed by the actual SE shown in orange. The ELPS are another set of standards that outline English language proficiency level descriptors for English language learners. The ELPS must be covered in instructional materials if they've been designated as appropriate. The ELPS language is the same regardless of the subject area, but the designation for inclusion in instructional materials can be different. Similar to the TEKS, the ELPS are divided into sections. There's an introduction, school district responsibilities, and knowledge and skills statements with student expectations. Now we're getting to the really fun part, the breakouts. TEA provides the breakouts. The breakouts identify component parts of each SE. Publishers correlate instructional materials to the breakouts rather than to the SEs. Then reviewers use those breakouts and the publisher's correlations to determine TEKS coverage. You'll find that certain words are treated differently in the breakouts. Everything joined by the words and or among or following the word including must be included in instructional materials. When you see words connected by or, you have to include one or the other. You're not required to include both, but you may if you like. Anything after the words such as is an example and not required to be included in instructional materials. Next, we're going to look at some examples. This SE says students are expected to make connections to personal experiences, ideas and other texts, and society. There are 3 words joined by and, so we will have 3 breakouts. Make connections to personal experiences, make connections to ideas and other texts, and make connections to society. This SE says the student is expected to analyze content to distinguish among denotative, connotative, and figurative meanings of words. When we see the word among, everything is included together. So this SE has only one breakout, which is an exact copy of the SE. In this example, you will find the word including, which is treated the same way as and. The student is expected to describe different forms of point of view, including first and third person. So we have 2 breakouts, one that includes first person and another that includes third person. Here we have the word or. Since you're only required to demonstrate alignment to one of the things in the list, there's only one breakout. The last example is such as. When you see these words, that tells you that the words that follow are just examples. You are not required to include those specific examples in instructional materials, but you may choose to do so. I have mentioned correlations a couple of times already, but now I'll explain exactly what they are and why they are so important. TEA uses the breakouts to create correlation instruments and sends them to publishers. Publishers complete those correlation instruments by entering citations. A citation is one specific example of content that covers one element of the TEKS or ELPS, which is called what? Since this is pre-recorded, I can't actually hear you, but I hope that you were screaming, breakout! A completed correlation instrument contains citations for every SE a publisher believes is sufficiently addressed in its instructional materials. You must provide at least 2 citations for every breakout, a narrative and an activity, in both the student and teacher materials. A narrative is an example of content that provides an opportunity in the student materials for the student to learn, or an opportunity in the teacher materials for the teacher to teach. An activity provides an opportunity for the student to demonstrate the knowledge or practice the skill. If you remember from the previous slide, I said that you have to provide 2 citations for every breakout in both the student and teacher materials. So you may be thinking that that equals a minimum of 4 citations for every breakout. However, we understand that teachers may use both the student and teacher materials, so the citations you provide from the student materials will double as citations for the teacher material. As long as they are accepted by the reviewers, the citations you provide for the student materials will count towards coverage for both the student and the teacher. Unfortunately, this does not work in reverse. Students do not typically have access to the teacher resources, so any citations you provide from the teacher materials will only count towards coverage for the teacher. However, it is possible to get credit for student coverage if the content in the teacher materials is actually intended for student use. In those instances, you would include that content as a student citation, not a teacher citation. The correlation template has space for up to 5 student citations and 5 teacher citations for each breakout. It is crucial that you provide accurate correlations. You should always begin with the best, most closely aligned content, then provide backup citations on the remaining rows. You also need to be very clear about where the content can be located. Whether an SE has 1, 4, or 20 breakouts, each breakout must be covered for that SE to be considered addressed. Your final TEKS coverage percentage will be determined based on the number of SEs the reviewers determine your product covers. So we'll divide the number of SEs the reviewers determine your product covers by the total number of SEs to determine your TEKS coverage percentage. At a minimum, your product must meet at least 50% of the TEKS, but it probably goes without saying that the higher your alignment, the better. Now we're going to look at the actual correlation instrument. When you're aligning to the TEKS, you need to be sure to select the TEKS tab. Then look at the information on the first few rows to make sure you're using the correct template. You will start entering information on row 5 by entering your company name, followed by the program title and ISBN. This information should match the information you provided on your IMQE application. If you offer the same content in different media formats, like a print and digital version, you can include the information for the other format in rows 8 and 9. You will need to enter the TEKS percentage in row 10, but we recommend that you enter this information after you've completed the rest of the template. That way, you'll be able to calculate your TEKS percentage accurately based on the total number of SEs for which you were able to provide a narrative and activity citation for each related breakout. Column A contains the knowledge and skills statement. Column B contains the student expectation. You will find that some student expectations are very similar, so it's always important to read it with the knowledge and skills statement. The breakouts are in column C. Remember that you must cover all of the breakouts in order to get credit for covering the student expectation. You've probably also noticed that there are two different row colors. The white rows are reserved for student citations. These are citations for content that is either in the student materials or is in the teacher material but intended for the student. The peach rows are reserved for citations from content that is only intended for the teacher. For each set of rows, the first two citation types have been entered for you because you must include a narrative and an activity citation in order to successfully demonstrate coverage of each breakout. The next three rows are set to none. So, if you enter citations in those rows, you must select the citation type. For every citation you must provide a component ISBN, the page numbers, and a description of where the content can be found, and if possible, a hyperlink that will direct users to the cited content. Hopefully, you're following along, but in case you need to see the information in a different way, think about a wheel. Now, imagine that the narrative is the rim of the wheel and the activity is the tire. If you want your wheel to work, you must have a rim and a tire in good working condition, just like a breakout needs a narrative and an activity in order to count towards coverage of an SE. If the breakout is a wheel, then the student expectation is a vehicle. And you need a different number of wheels depending on the vehicle, just like you need to cover a different number of breakouts depending on the SE. If you have a flat tire or a damaged rim, you can't drive your car. If you don't have an acceptable narrative and activity citation for each of the SE's breakouts, you can't get credit for that SE. Now we're going to switch gears to ELPS correlations. You're only required to cover each ELPS breakout once. Some of the ELPS SEs must be covered in both the student and teacher materials, but others are only required to be covered in teacher materials. Just like the TEKS citations, you will receive credit for covering content in the student and teacher material for content found in the student materials, but not the other way around. Since you're only required to provide one acceptable citation for the ELPS breakouts, we've provided fewer rows. You may provide up to 4 student and 4 teacher citations for each breakout. And just like the TEKS correlations, we ask that you take your time, provide your best citations first, and be very specific when providing location information. Every breakout must be covered in order for the SE to be considered addressed. We will calculate your final ELPS percentage in the same way we calculate your TEKS percentage by dividing the number of covered SEs by the total number of SEs. When you're ready to enter your ELPS citations, make sure you're on the ELPS tab. Rows 5 through 9 will automatically populate using the information that you entered on the TEKS tab. Since there are some ELPS that are required only in teacher materials, you will need to calculate and enter a percentage for the student material and the teacher material. The layout of the ELPS tab is very similar to that of the TEKS tab. You will see the knowledge and skills statement, followed by the SE and the breakout. But column D is different. This is where you'll find where and in what grade levels the breakout must be covered. Anytime you see T, the breakout must be covered in the teacher materials, and S means the breakout must be covered in the student material. The letters are followed by the applicable grade levels. In this example, the breakout must be covered in teacher materials for all grade levels and in student materials for grades 6 through 12. But in this example, the breakout is required to be covered only in the teacher materials for all grade levels. To help you distinguish between the two, we've colored teacher-only cells green. You will also see some cells with NA inside, which means that you're not required to align your materials to those breakouts. We've grayed those rows out entirely. Just like the TEKS tab, the white rows are for student citations and the peach rows are for teacher citations. After the review, we will send you a report that shows the TEKS alignment percentage and ELPS alignment percentage that you achieved. If you do not reach the percentage you indicated on your correlations, you may be able to update your correlations by providing new citations or developing new content, but you may only do this for citations that were rejected by the reviewers. To be eligible, the reviewers must find that your product meets at least 75% of the alignment percentage you provided on your completed correlation document. You will have 24 hours from the time that we send you the report to notify us that you intend to provide updated correlations. And although you will have longer than 24 hours to provide the updated correlations, you do need to work quickly to get them to TEA. We will provide you with specific timelines and instructions when we send you the review results. Now, I know you all want to complete your correlations like a pro, so I'm going to share some tips on the next few slides. Make sure you complete every field for every citation. It is in your best interest to keep the reviewers happy, and the best way to do that is to make the review easy to complete by providing very descriptive, easy to follow citations. It's very important that you select a citation type because there are formulas built into the spreadsheet that are looking for the word narrative or activity for any citations that are accepted by the reviewers. If you don't select a citation type, citations on those rows will not count towards your TEKS coverage percentage even if the reviewers accept them. Do not correlate to components that were not included on your IMQE component form. The reviewers use that form to determine which component to look at. Your citation should be very specific. Think of a single place on the page you can point to. So you should never include a huge range of pages for any citation. Make sure you're listing the citations on correct rows. If the content is intended for the students, the citation should go on the white rows labeled Student Teacher. If it is intended only for teachers, the citation should go on the peach rows labeled Teacher Only. If you provide hyperlinks, make sure they're directing reviewers to the exact content you're citing and that they are working links. I mentioned on the previous slide that there are formulas built into the template, so it's very important that you use the one that we provided to you. You will need to enter all of the required information and can only provide one citation per row. I know you'll be tempted, but do not save this template in any other program and then try to convert it back to Excel. Several of the cells are locked on the template to prevent you from mistakenly changing information, so do not copy the text into a blank Excel. Trust me, we'll be able to tell. Don't save it in the OneDrive in an effort to allow multiple people to work on it at once. This will only make the document angry. Don't add tabs, change the font type or size, or use formulas to populate information. And don't try to squeeze multiple citations into a single row. You are allowed to paste information from another document into the template, but you must use the Paste Special function to do so. To do that, you'll copy the data from the original source, expand the Paste menu by clicking on the arrow below Paste, and select Paste Values. Now I'm going to demo what that looks like. So I'm going to click the arrow under Paste, select Values, or I can select Paste Special and then Values and click OK. You should always use unique ISBNs, but do not use dashes. All right, I hope you've been paying attention because now it's time for a test. I'm going to show you sample correlations that have a mistake, and I want you to try and find it. Feel free to shout out your answers. What's wrong with this picture? Oops, the publisher didn't select a citation type for these two citations. What's wrong with this one? Oh no, there are not supposed to be dashes in your ISBNs. Now how about this one? What is going on here? The publisher has cited the entire book. The reviewers will have no idea where to find the content applicable to those breakouts. Okay, this one may be a hard one. What do you see? Well, there are two breakouts and the publisher only provided citations for one of them. It is not possible for the publisher to receive credit for this SE. And finally, what's wrong with this one? If you got it right, you're already a pro. We have 4 narrative citations for the first breakout and no activity. And there are 3 activity citations for the next breakout with no narrative. Hopefully you got all of these correct, but if you didn't, please go back and review the correlations section of this training. Now let's end with some answers to some commonly asked questions. Now hopefully you already know the answer to this question, but just in case, how many citations are required for each breakout? In order for the student expectation to be addressed, each breakout must include an acceptable narrative and activity citation. If you don't include both citation types for each breakout of an SE, that SE will not be considered addressed and will not count towards the product's TEKS coverage percentage. While not required, multiple citations for each breakout are recommended because that gives reviewers a backup. May you provide a justification or rationale for your citations? No. You must provide the ISBN, page number, and specific location for the cited content. We prefer that you also add hyperlinks because they're very helpful to the reviewers, but don't include any additional information such as a justification. You may be curious about who will see the correlations that you provide. TEA is going to review the correlations to ensure they've been completed correctly and then convert them to an evaluation instrument that will be used by the state review panels. Correlations, like anything else you submit to TEA, are subject to public information requests. Are you required to include every component listed on your IMQE component form on your correlation document? No. But you can't cite a component on your correlations that you did not include on your IMQE component form. Who will determine TEKS coverage and how does TEA determine who will be in that group? The reviewers are responsible for reviewing the citations provided by the publisher and accepting or rejecting those citations. Individuals all across the state apply or are nominated to serve on the state review panel. After proper approval, Individuals with content expertise and experience are invited to serve on the panel. TEA assembles panels that, to the extent possible, reflect the diversity of the state. And a majority of the members on each panel must be considered an academic expert. Do you have to select a narrative and activity from the same lesson? No. Please select the narrative and activity that you believe best addresses the breakout. If you've forgotten the ELPS correlation training by the time that you get ready to complete your correlation document, you may be asking why some of the ELPS are grayed out. And the answer is that although teachers are required to incorporate all of the ELPS in their instruction, some of the ELPS are not required to be included in instructional materials. We've grayed those out on the correlation document. If you're still confused, you may be asking yourself, who will help me figure this out? But don't worry, each publisher will be assigned a liaison who will answer questions about the correlations and the TEKS review. Your liaison will introduce herself once the application deadline has passed. In the meantime, you can reach us at 512-463-9601 or review.adoption@tea.texas.gov. Thank you so much for listening.